What's up, world? Let me tell you about this beard growth oil I got from 12 tribes on Earth. 8 ounces of oily goodness with a nozzle that prevents sprays and spills, and soft ingredients that make it perfect addition to anyone's morning routine. From coconut to castor, all these oils are hand chosen. After using this herbal blend, the biggest thing I noticed is how soft and how strong my hair was, and how good I feel. Pick up your bottle today and make your beard the star of the show.
One of the biggest lies that's told is Irish were slaves too, which we know they were indentured servants. And many of these non supremacists keep trying to say this as if it was the same as chattel slavery. We all know the answer to this, but I still went to Chat GPT to see what type of answer I would get. So I'm going to let you listen to that answer. And it had some interesting things in there too about indentured servants and around the time when it ended. And there's reasons why it ended, some that you might not have heard before. So let's get to it.
That's a really important question because the phrase Irish were slaves too is often used in bad faith by white supremacists to minimize or distort the reality of African chattel slavery in the Americas. Here's the breakdown: the truth about Irish history, indentured servitude versus chattel slavery. Many Irish immigrants, especially in the 1600s to 1700s, came to America and the Caribbean as indentured servants. Indentured servants signed contracts or were forced into them after being deported for crimes, rebellion, or poverty to work for a landowner for 4 to 7 years in exchange for passage, room, and board. Key difference: after their term, indentured servants were free and could own land, marry, and build wealth. African people, by contrast, were forced into chattel slavery. It was for life. Enslaved Africans' children were also enslaved. They had no legal rights, no path to freedom, and were considered property under law. Why the myth exists. White supremacists push the Irish were slaves too, myth to downplay the brutality of African slavery, create division between Black Americans and white ethnic groups, suggest slavery was just a universal hardship instead of the racialized system of oppression that uniquely targeted Africans. Why the myth exists. White supremacists push the Irish were slaves too myth to downplay the brutality of African slavery, create division between Black Americans and white ethnic groups, suggest slavery was just a universal hardship instead of the racialized system of oppression that uniquely targeted Africans. So, no, the Irish were not slaves in the same way Africans were. Some faced brutal indentured servitude, deportations, and discrimination, but they could eventually assimilate into whiteness and gain rights. African slavery was uniquely designed to strip generations of freedom, culture, and humanity, making it incomparable. When indentured servitude ended, indentured servitude gradually faded out in the late 1700s and early 1800s. It never had a single abolition law like slavery, but by the early 19th century, it was mostly gone in the United States. In the American colonies, indentured servitude peaked in the 1600s and early 1700s, especially in Virginia, Maryland, and the Caribbean. By the Revolutionary War, 1770s to 1780s, fewer indentured servants were arriving. By the early 1800s, the system was largely replaced by wage labor and African slavery in the South. Some remnants of indenture continued in places like the Caribbean, South Asia, and Africa under the British and French colonial empires into the 19th century. For example, Britain brought Indian indentured workers to the Caribbean, Africa, and Fiji from the 1830s to 1917. That was different from colonial American indenture, but showed how the model was adapted globally. Why it ended rise of African slavery, cheaper and permanent. Landowners realized enslaved Africans provided lifetime labor, while indentured servants only worked for 4 to 7 years. Enslaved Africans' children were automatically enslaved, making slavery a self-reproducing labor force. Besides, most indenture servants were poor workers. Decline in European willingness. Fewer poor Europeans wanted to sign contracts for brutal colonial work after word spread about the harsh conditions. Opportunities within Europe improved slightly by the 1700s, reducing desperation. Economic shift. As economies matured, wage labor became more practical. Instead of binding contracts, people worked for pay. Political and social change. The American Revolution promoted ideas of liberty and freedom, making indenture seem outdated and less acceptable, even while slavery persisted. Summary ended late 1700s to early 1800s in the U.S., but continued in colonial systems abroad into the late 1800s. Why? Replaced by African slavery, decline in European workers willing to indenture, economic changes, and shifting social attitudes.
Okay, so first of all, I know many of you already know this. This is really to debunk a lot of the myths and lies that have been told for a long time. That's the whole purpose of this. So, y'all, you heard the answer from Chat GPT. So let me know what you think in the comment section. Yeah, I think it did pretty well considering it's AI, but what do you think? Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.